free, weapon free, and Mongolia nuclear weapon free, and the Central Asia nuclear weapon free, but Northeast Asia is like a missing link, you know. So how to tackle this issue together with the ratification of TPNW around the Korean Peninsula, particularly Northeast Asia. So very heavy topic, but these are all related in terms of the peace and SDG. We are going to address one by one. Okay, so now let me invite Patricia Garcia. So you have 10 minutes. You can briefly introduce yourself and your organization. I guess this is a part of your PowerPoint presentation. Please, Patricia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anselmo, and thank you to the organizers of the PyeongChang Peace Forum. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be invited to speak at this important event. My name is Patricia Garcia, and I'm the Partnership Development Manager with Institute for Economics and Peace. Just very briefly, the Institute for Economics and Peace is a independent, nonpartisan global think tank that is dedicated to shifting the world's focus to peace as a positive, tangible, and achievable measure of human well-being and development. Founded in 2008 by Steve Kilalea, our executive chairman, IEP aims to develop new conceptual frameworks to define peacefulness in many of the world's countries, and also to provide the metrics or measures to enable us to gain a better understanding of what we call as the social, economic, environmental, and political factors that drive peace. IEP also delivers positive peace workshops, and we have worked with our global partners, such as governmental organizations, international and local NGOs, community groups, universities, and educational institutions to deliver these workshops. And we've delivered these positive peace workshops in Mexico, Colombia, Tunisia, Uganda, and in Thailand, Cambodia, Philippines, and most recently in Australia. IEP also undertakes research consultancies to produce data on peace and development and human security issues for the United Nations, for the World Bank, and other multilateral intergovernmental organizations. I'd like to just start now to talk about our groundbreaking Global Peace Index.
Okay, slide. Your PowerPoint now is okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll just get that on slide. Right. Just to start off. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, we're a research organization, and our research is used extensively by the OECD, the Commonwealth Secretariat, World Bank, and the United Nations. And our work is included in thousands of university courses, and we've had over 500,000 downloads of our IEP reports in the last 12 months. We have offices in Sydney, New York, Brussels, The Hague, Mexico City, and Harare. Now, the Global Peace Index is actually our first attempt, which we produced in 2007, which is an empirical study of peace that measures the absence of violence or the absence of the fear of violence in 163 countries. And this represents 99.7% of the world's total population. With our Global Peace Index, to measure the absence of violence or the fear of violence, we use 23 indicators, which we've developed, and we're guided by a panel of international experts. These global peace indicators, which I mentioned, 23, are divided into 3 domains that we use to measure violence or the fear of violence. The first domain is domestic and international conflict. The second domain is society, safety and security. And the third domain is militarization. As you can see there, we've got 6 indicators in the domestic international conflict, such as intensity of organized internal conflict, relations with neighboring countries. And also we have 10 indicators which we use in the safety and security domain, and then 7 indicators in the militarization domain. I just thought I'd put a quick map to just show you, because we produced the Global Peace Index, and to give you a sense of the 163 countries, how they are ranked in terms of peacefulness. The most peaceful countries are the green colored countries you see on the map, going down to red, which is the least peaceful. So in other words, you have green as being the most peaceful, and then you have yellow, then you have orange, then you have red. And maybe you could look at your own countries and see on the Global Peace Index where your country is ranked. I just want to put up the 10 most peaceful countries, starting with Iceland, New Zealand, Portugal, Austria, Denmark, Canada, Singapore, Czech Republic, Japan, and Switzerland. The 10 least peaceful countries are Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, South Sudan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Congo, DRC, Central African Republic, and Russia. And I think you can see from these countries that for many of you, you probably would be quite aware that they do fall in the areas you probably had thought they would be. But there would be some countries that you would probably be surprised as where they rank in the Global Peace Index. So it's good for you to look at the map overall and to see where your country ranks. Positive peace represents the attitudes, institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. One of the key tools of IEP has been the development of the positive peace framework. What is positive peace? Basically, IEP defines and describes positive peace as one aspect called negative peace, which is the absence of violence or the fear of violence. And the other side of the coin is positive peace, which is the attitudes, institutions, and structures that create and sustain positive, peaceful societies. With these 2 elements of peace, we've been able to develop a set of interrelated factors or pillars, which we call the 8 pillars of positive peace. These 8 pillars are well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbours, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and sound business environment. IEP believes that the positive peace framework, by applying this to the issues of the country or the community, we are able to have positive peace in each of the countries or communities by using these pillars of 8 pillars of positive peace. If you look at the Positive Peace Index of 2019, again here, to just make it quicker because we don't have time, to look at the overall global map, you could see the state of positive peace in 163 countries. And we've used the color code where the darker blue is the very high positive peace countries, down to the very light blue, which is very low positive peace countries. Again, it would be interesting for you to look at where your countries fit on this map. Now, one of the most important things is that why do we need positive peace, and why is positive peace important? IEP has been able to show through its empirical quantitative research and data that if you have high levels of positive peace in a country or community, the benefits that you will get from this include stronger resilience, better environmental outcomes, high measures of well-being, better performance on the Sustainable Development Goals, higher per capita income, and For this reason, we need to ensure people can see, as you saw in this last slide, that there's a strong connection between positive peace and better performance of sustainable development goals. How do we develop this positive peace framework? The thinking behind the positive peace framework is based on what we call systems thinking. In other words, we look at peace as a system. If you look at a system, as many of you know, systems are based on many different factors interacting, coming and going, input and output, internal, external. And if you look at peace as a system, rather than as what some people might call an ideal abstract concept, that's sometimes qualitatively based, IEP has been able to show that you can describe peace as a system that is based on quantitative measures. So for this reason, I just wanted to show you this graph about how, if you look at peace as a system, for example, if you liken the human cell as a system, as you know, a human cell, behind a human cell, you have all the molecules, all the different proteins, the DNA, all the different factors that make that cell operate to make it normal. And this is the same thing we should look at when we're looking at peace, to look at it as a system. And what's important in the system is that the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. Moving on now to the Sustainable Development Goals and IEP's involvement with Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned earlier, we believe our positive peace framework and our work on positive peace has been able to contribute to supporting an environment that enables a country or community to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, SDG 16, the goal to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development with access to justice, and also to build an effective and accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels. That particular goal, with the 12 targets, is actually a goal that has a lot of the positive peace measures. And when I mean measures, I refer to those 8 pillars. In 2019, IEP was asked to produce an SDG 16 plus progress report and an SDG 16 in the Pacific report. These 2 reports, which you see here, were presented to the high-level political forum of the UN SDG Summit in New York in July 2019. So I'd like to share these reports with you because for many of you, you may be able then to access these reports, which are available online on IEP's website, Vision of Humanity. And the key aspects of these reports shows that there is very much a strong link and relevance to IEP's both Global Peace Index and also positive peace work with the 169 targets of the SDGs, not only SDG 16, but also the related targets relating to peace and development. I'd also like to say that we're currently preparing a report for UNDP on the interlinkages of the SDGs for the UNDP, and we hope when that report becomes available, we will be able to share that with you. This year, we're also preparing an update on the positive peace report, which I referred to earlier. And from this, we may be able then to be able to see how being able to support positive peace and using the data of positive peace in countries can help support countries' own progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular SDG 16, which is the goal of peace, justice and strong institutions.
Okay, Patricia, time stops. Can you wind up?
Just to wind up, just to say that for anyone who would like to have access to all our reports and publications, we put all our reports and publications online. They are free and available online on our website, visionofhumanity.org. And also we have our communications if people would like to connect with us just here on the slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia Garcia. So this is the first presentation. As you know, title of this session is the Peace SDG. The IEP, they have introduced this, operationalized this concept of positive peace, at the same time linking it to SDG framework, so-called SDG 16 plus report. You introduce SDG 16 Pacific report. I hope next time, hopefully next year, or if not 2 years later, we can have SDG 16 Asia report in cooperation with the many CSOs in Asia. I think that's very important because we need the evidence-based research for advocacy. You know? Especially we need to collect, we have a lot of data here and there, but how to use all the data for our effective advocacy. I think you gave us a lot of new ideas and the opportunities for us to improve our advocacy. Thank you for your input once again. So let's go to New York all the way. So New York, as you know, this is a center for not only member state, but also CSO. There are many CSOs. One of the important CSO, our colleague, is the 1325, which is a global focal point on 1325. Mavic, you have 10 minutes. Please introduce yourself, organization, and then your PowerPoint, please.
Thank you very much, Anselmo. Annyeonghaseyo. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who have joined us at this session. The Asia Civic Agenda on Peace and Sustainable Development Goals that is part of the 2021 PyeongChang Peace Forum. My name is Mavic Cabrera Baleza. I'm the founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders and a proud co-sponsor of this event. We are an international coalition of women's rights organizations and civil society groups from nearly 50 countries, most of which are affected by war or violent conflicts. Our membership range is broad, and the work that our amazing members, including Aman Indonesia here, is very critical to the achievement of inclusive and sustainable peace. And the work varies from maintaining shelters for women who are victims of rape and other forms of sexual and gender-based violence during conflict, to provision of legal assistance and psychosocial counseling services, to initiating national action plans on women, peace and security, and more recently, the Youth Peace and Security Agenda, which are the instruments by which we hold governments accountable to these important resolutions. They are the tools that we use to translate the words of these important international laws into realistic, practical, and necessary actions on the ground. My topic for today is the global overview of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, and its links to the Sustainable Development Goals. The Resolution 1325 and the 9 supporting resolutions on women, peace, and security adopted by the Security Council and the Sustainable Development Goals are actually part of the same equation, and I will explain why. So the Resolution 1325 was unanimously adopted by the Security Council in October 2000, and it's the first of the 10 Security Council resolutions on this agenda of women, peace, and security. And why is it important? Security Council Resolution 1325 is important because it recognizes that the impact of war on women and girls impacts international peace and security. While the name or the title of the resolution says Women, Peace and Security, it's not about women and girls alone. It's about international peace and security. And that is actually why having this agenda on the Security Council is important, because it elevates the issue to a matter of international peace and security. Before the adoption of Resolution 1325, this issue has already been addressed in the Beijing Platform for Action, which is the Global Women's Agenda for women's empowerment and advancement of women's status. It is also covered in the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. But the challenge that we in the women's movement had before Resolution 1325 was adopted was that women, peace and security, or how the war or violent conflicts affect women, are dismissed as women's issues alone, not important to everyone else. So Resolution 1325 has recognized that, yes, women make up majority of the victims of war, but a most important part of that recognition is that the recognition and valuing of women not as passive victims, but rather women are leaders, peace builders, and decision makers. And Resolution 1325 affirms that peace negotiations and peace agreements are most likely to succeed and be implemented effectively when women are meaningful participants. So that is why Resolution 1325 is very important. Now, fast forward from 2000, when 1325 was adopted, we actually commemorated the 20th anniversary of this groundbreaking resolution in October of last year. And in the past 20 years, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda has been established as a critical component of global affairs that is necessary not only for the effectiveness of the UN and the international community's efforts in conflict resolution, conflict prevention, and peace building, but also in sustainable development. The effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security resolutions is a requisite in the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it is evident that across the main pillars of the UN and other multilateral institutions, as well as regional organizations, and the broader international community, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda is a driver for transformative change. However, despite the numerous evidence that underpin the transformative power of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, the actual implementation remains slow and uneven. Now, there are already 86 national action plans on women, peace, and security, including the National Action Plan in South Korea, including some of the countries represented here, Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines. The United States, of course, has its National Action Plan, which has recently been called a strategy. And in fact, it's an act adopted by the US Congress, which is very, very important, but that's for a separate discussion. So despite this, despite the 86 national action plans and the regional action plans and the supporting resolutions, the implementation still leaves a lot of room for improvement. And in this discussion, we emphasize that the resolution has to be taken outside of New York, outside of the halls or the outside of the Security Council chamber, but brought to communities, the local communities directly affected by conflict. And this is the process of localization that my organization, the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, champion. In his multiple reports to the Security Council, the Secretary General has cited localization as a key strategy for implementation that has yielded practical and necessary results. Localization ensures that the local needs and priorities of populations affected by violent conflicts inform national, regional, and global policy development. Moving on to a topic that is still very related to the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. We've all seen that that local communities that are already experiencing violence had much, much more difficulties coping during the pandemic. Women who are affected by conflict are also suffering much more under the pandemic. They are caught between the conflict and the pandemic. And there are at least 2 billion people around the world who are in that situation, affected by fragility, conflict, and violence, at the same time struggling to cope with this prolonged pandemic. Why? Because the pandemic has become a conflict multiplier with a shortage of healthcare services, medical equipment, crippling poverty, the vulnerability of women and young people and other historically marginalized groups has been highlighted even more. And we all know about the increase in domestic violence, of course, when women are trapped in their homes where they live in violent, in a relationship of where there is intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So in other words, the pandemic has aggravated the underlying root causes of armed conflicts and around the world, and has also caused delays and interruptions in peace negotiations, the implementation of peace agreements, and other peace and security processes. And to make matters worse, a number of countries with authoritarian governments has taken advantage of the situation to adopt much more repressive laws. Now, the weakness of healthcare systems in different parts of the world, not just in developing or conflict-affected countries, but in developed countries like the United States, has again aggravated the inequalities that are already existing. And this is where our lens of, our development lens come into the picture. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is a universal agenda for all United Nations member states, which requires policy coherence across the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but including especially the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality and Sustainable Development Goal 16 on peaceful and inclusive societies. It doesn't
sorry,
really
can you wind
need...
up in 1 minute because already time's up. So 1 minute, please.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right. Yes, I will. I'll try. So it doesn't need mastery of all these international laws and policies and the sustainable development goals to understand that without positive peace that Patricia was explaining earlier, which for us, we qualify that as inclusive and sustainable peace and security, particularly human security, we cannot achieve full gender equality. Conversely, without gender equality, we cannot have positive peace. In other words, gender inequality is one of the drivers of conflicts. Without the realization of these two important concepts of peace and security and gender equality, we cannot achieve sustainable development. Imagine a community where girls are being abducted, or a city that is the target of bombing, or a town that is considered a hotbed of radicalization. Can those places achieve sustainable development goal? The answer is a no-brainer, right? So gender equality, peace and security, particularly human security, and sustainable development goals are all parts of the same equation. This prolonged pandemic has emphasized that even more. We cannot have one without the other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mavik. Thank you very much. I think as a practitioner and advocate, you really help us to understand, the interlinkages between the 1325 and also SDG and also even the COVID-19 pandemic, And I think we need to really promote this nexus approach or mainstreaming approach, not silo, And this is one of the reasons that we want to put peace and SDG as umbrella, where we can try to make a more interlinking and also nexus approach. So now we have two input, researchers and practitioners and advocates. Let's go into the concrete reality, which is this time the Philippines. Bianca, you have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Anselmo. Wait, let me share my screen. There. So, good morning, everyone. I am Bianca Pabotoy. I'm a Women Peace Security Project Officer at the Center for Peace Education, Miriam College. So we're one of the college's 3 advocacy centers. We promote a culture of peace through peace education and advocacy because we believe to reach peace, we must teach peace. And so peace courses are offered in the college, while in informal settings, we conduct capacity building trainings for communities who are vulnerable to conflict. We're also a member of Pax Christi Philippines, the Philippine arm of Pax Christi International, a global Catholic peace movement that promotes peace, respect of human rights, justice, and reconciliation throughout the world. And lastly, I'm also a member of the Young Women Leaders for Peace Philippines, a program under the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. It was perfect I'm speaking right after Mavik. So today I'm pleased to share some of our center's experience with both UNSCR 1325 Women, Peace and Security and UNSCR 2250 Youth, Peace and Security in the midst of an ever-changing environment amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's talk about the women and youth at the front line in peace and security. So next. So in 2019, CPE, the Center for Peace Education, organized a project called the Women's Agency in Keeping the Peace Promoting Security, or WePeace for short. It's a localization initiative to capacitate selected community women on gender-responsive peacemaking and peacekeeping through, again, capacity building training, with a training team of 12 women peace builders from all over the country with their extensive experience in different aspects of peace work. Our training topics included this discussion on policy and legal mandates, introducing 1325, conflict resolution and mediation, monitoring and documentation, among others, and a special sharing of on all women peacekeeping experience from the northern part in the Philippines. Through this, it has helped the formation of women peacekeeping teams and enabled women's increased participation in existing peacekeeping mechanisms. So though the current teams we do have remain informal, meaning they have yet to be formally supported by their local government units, they keep their participation, their momentum alive following the training through monthly meetings or keeping a Facebook Messenger group. This has helped a lot. And it's also helped that the women we have trained are part of other existing groups, such as church groups and women's groups in their communities. The participants' profile for this training are either women who are engaged in their local women's organizations, working on projects with their local government units, and representatives and officials in their barangays, which is the smallest form of government here in the Philippines. And given their current roles, participants from WIPIs have engaged in community-based mediation and monitoring, again, further advancing horizontal peace and women's meaningful participation at the grassroots level. So we're really trying to localize WPS here. And as you can see in the Philippine map on the right, these are the different conflict lines and the different communities we've worked with in 2019. So it's very diverse, which is very interesting because when they do sharing sessions, they find out they have a lot of things in common, despite being very far in terms of geography. Next. So on 2250 Youth, Peace and Security, I am a member of the Young Women Plus Leaders for Peace in the Philippines. So YWL is a program that helps young women and girls, but in the case in the Philippines, we've also included our male allies, gain the skills and build confidence to become leaders in their communities. Because in countries experiencing conflict and crisis, young women and girls are often overlooked and can be the last to eat, get medical care, or an education. So since 2019, I have joined 2 GNWP organized capacity building trainings that really, dove deep into discussing the current peace and security situation in the Philippines. And these trainings have also opened an opportunity for me and my fellow YWL members to organize community discussions on key issues such as the 2019 Philippine midterm elections and the passage of the Bangsamoro Organic Law in Mindanao. So here are some of our photos. And again, when young people's leadership and peace-building potentials are realized, we are a positive force that transform communities and societies for the better. So these are photos from our 2019 community youth discussions organized and implemented by my co-YWL members in different parts of the Philippines for different groups of young people. So students, members of the Sangguniang Kabataan, which is the youth council part of the formal local government units in the Philippines, and members of the LGBTQIA+. So now, in the time of COVID, how does YWPS and YPS look? So from our experience, one, there's a lot of shift of the nature of engagements. So it's becoming more humanitarian relief distribution, learning sessions, and orientation seminars. So a lot of our current efforts and work in the communities have focused on humanitarian relief distribution in the early part of the lockdown around March to June in 2020 due to very strict protocols on going outside. And early in the lockdown, while everyone was still adjusting to the changes of the work setup, engagement had been sustained by moving our platform online. So we're sustaining our presence and raising awareness of activities, supporting implementation of the agendas online. So learning sessions and orientation seminars continue. In 2019, CPE we had a one-time premiere of this WPS documentary on our 2019 project. For YWL, we have the Youth Fighting Against COVID, Voices of Young Women at the Front Line. So some testimonies of what's being done across the Philippines. And just recently, our group also organized a leadership talk in 2021. And so we were able to invite young people from 3 island provinces in the country. So the shift of moving a lot of events online has also opened the door for more people to learn about these agendas and the work we do. Next is the challenges. So these are some of the highlights of the challenges we've had after reflection. First is funding. So shift of funding towards COVID-19 response. In a specific case, counterparting arrangement with the government have been shelved to give way for COVID response, which is a challenge again, because a lot of our groups are informal, so they do need resources. Next would be restrictions to movement. So slowed activities and limited face-to-face meetings. And this has really been difficult because in rural or far-flung areas, it is difficult and almost impossible to have any online meeting with the difficulty to access stable mobile and internet connection. And so this is just a testament to the ever-growing digital divide and issues of connectivity. It just emphasizes the low to zero access to computers, gadgets, mobile services, and internet connection. And for our case, for example, the women in WPs are not digital natives. So doing any form of online work, online training is inaccessible, and it's in itself a steep learning curve for them. And lastly, a big challenge in the Philippines, I'd say throughout this time, has been the hostility towards activism. Politically, our environment is very hostile right now, and attacks are more prominent because these are being done online. So in June last year, for example, there had been a lot of identity theft with the creation of fake Facebook accounts of users who were vocal on the dangers of the Philippines anti-terrorism law. Because under the anti-terrorism law, people can be apprehended without a warrant or detained for weeks prior to appearance of a judge. So not only is this law broad enough to permit the detention of people for social media posts critical of the government, it also makes a criminal offense to incite, quote unquote, incite others to commit terrorism, with a very broad definition of terrorism through speeches, proclamations, writings, and etc. There has also been a lot of killings of human rights defenders as well, which is even more amplified given that everyone's online. So news travels faster even than before, and it's difficult to voice out dissent when there is very poor security online. So how do we move? This is a statement of YWL. It was a request for a ceasefire in the middle of the pandemic, and approaching the COVID-19 through a health response and not a militarized response. So moving forward, how do we move forward? First of all, we need continued capacity building. And now is the time to get creative and simplify training. It's even more crucial now to listen to what communities need and how they want those needs to be addressed. It is important to adjust to what methodology fits the best to the members in the community. So for example, in WPs, we hope to continue engagement through the creation of translated information, education, and communication materials that can sustain the knowledge they have gained from our face-to-face training in 2019. Next would be, of course, stronger human rights protection against state intimidation, identity theft, and red tagging. So red tagging in the Philippines refers to the malicious blacklisting of individuals or organizations critical or not fully supportive of the actions of a sitting government administration. So they are tagged as either a communist or terrorist or both, regardless of one's actual political beliefs or group affiliations. So it is impossible, for a society to move forward without healthy dissent and conversations about the real state of our nation. So due process must be respected, and there has to be strengthened justice system that is fair to all in order for both YPS and WPS to thrive, and including the SDGs, and for peace and justice to really be fulfilled. And lastly, amplifying collective voices linked to existing structures. So as a member of Pax Christi Philippines, in 2020, Pope Francis released his encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti, which is really important considering the Philippines is a Catholic country. And so this is one good way for us to also promote peace, because Pope emphasized fraternity and social friendship as a way to build better and a more just and peaceful world with the contribution of all people and institutions, with an empathetic confirmation of a no to war and to globalized indifference. And so connecting this to our current shared experience in the midst of a global pandemic, we need now more than ever to work efficiently. As always, we need to link collective voices and experiences that while the WPS and YPS implementation and localization still has a long way to go, both have indeed opened spaces for meaningful participation for women and young leaders here in the Philippines, for example. And moving forward, it's important that YPS and WPS be linked to existing mechanisms or agendas such as the SDGs, from the local to the national government units. And while we need to always think of long-term perspectives, there has to be an answer to the urgencies of now, and support can't be compartmentalized to one specific agenda anymore or to the other, because right now we're competing for resources with a virus that we really can't, negotiate with. And so
Okay,
that's it.
Bianca, you
These
need
are
to really
some.
wind up. Bianca, you need to already time's up. Okay.
Yes. This is my last slide. So these are some photos of our activities from 2019 to 2020. So these are from our face-to-face, and then which slowly evolved to a lot of online. So social media is a very strong power here in the Philippines. So we maximize that for the good, positive peace, through positive peace. So that's it for me. Thank you for attention. Maraming salamat and kamsahamnida.
Okay, thank you, Bianca. I think it's very interesting to see how the group in the Philippine Women Peace Builders, the linking 1325 2250 in the context of COVID-19. Thank you for your excellent presentation. I'm happy to see you as a Pax Christi member, because I'm also a member of Pax Christi Korea, which was born only last year. Okay, let's move to the next one. From the local national Philippines, we are going the regional in Southeast Asia and beyond. Now we have a Ruby for AMAN, Asia Muslim Action Network, also very active network in the region. Ruby, you have 10 minutes, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear my voice clearly. My name is Ruby Khalifa. I am Secretary General of the Asian Muslim Action Network, but I'm also one of the founding member of AMAN in Indonesia, along with other civil society. So I would like to share a specific context about Indonesia, how the resolution 1325 on women, peace and security implementing in the context of Indonesia. And specifically, I would like to link with the global crisis that many countries dealing with that regarding with violent extremism. So let me put my screen. Two things that I would like to highlight here to remind you. First is the result of the global study on the 15 years of the implementation of women, peace and security by Radhika Kumaraswamy, released in 2015, that actually even shifted the discourse at the global level as well as national level to highlights or integrate preventing violent extremism into women, peace and security agenda. In the context of Indonesia, it is very, very timely, and it is that actually the new challenge when we talk about women, peace and security, dealing with the growing of radicalism and also violent extremism. So the other issue that I would like to bring here is recently the president signed the new presidential decree number 7, year 2021, regarding the National Action Plan on Preventing Violent Extremism. This is the second National Action Plan that communicating each other with women, peace and security. Therefore, I'm interested to bring this into the how this two National Action Plan should interact and implementing in effective way. However, I also would like to bring the context of rehabilitation and reintegration. The fact that after the fall of ISIS, I think many countries now still in process of assessing to bring back the citizen, or they call it ISIS sympathizer or ISIS supporters, back to the home country. But of course, we are facing a lot of debate currently, because in the context of Indonesia, for example, Indonesia only accept below 10 years children that will be managed by the government. So with that, I'm interested to elaborate in the context where women, peace and security been implementing in Indonesia, but at the same time we also implementing the PVE. So just very quick look about why it is important to talk about this agenda. If you're realizing that the shifting terrorism or even violent extremism from backyard to dining room, just like metaphor we bring from Indonesia to share that how changing the trend on the radicalism and violent extremism happening in Indonesia, from male games to the family game. If you're realizing that the new trend that suicide bombing is carrying all the member of family, and then that means that the process of radicalization is happening in the center of the family. There is no more the typical of organization that's clandestine and secretly arranged. It is already open discussed and table in the dining room, meaning that the whole part of the family engage actively in this process of radicalization, including taking action together. And even this, actually, we've been challenged by from segregated gender rule that putting women before a supporter. Currently, when we see that the narrative that actually putting on the propaganda of ISIS and some other supporters, they are more like beyond gender stereotyping. Even some of the feminist narrative been hijacked it and use it and giving the new meaning. That is all more like how do you call it? Flux and fluid, and it's difficult even to identify whom actually more progressive and whom actually not, because the narrative has been put there is for the particularly and segmented group to be recruited. Other thing, we are facing the vulnerabilities among women that drive to extremism. In the context of Indonesia, when we talk about extremism, we cannot deny that our history is actually indicating a strong, local groups that associated with the radicalism thinking. We dealing with economic injustice, unfunctional family, meaning that the family doesn't provide equal space for children, and there's no open communication with the parents that easily actually leading to that violent extremism, because the children easily access from other network, and they bring a lot of crisis that happening inside them into that network. So, and textual religious interpretation, one of the also vulnerabilities, and internet and social media actually bringing a lot of spaces for very conservative religious interpretation that you contested there. And then not only that, but also they change the looks. They looks more popular. They looks more, get a lot of support, and that is actually hindering some of the effort that actually doing by the progressive group. Lack of media literacy normally happen among many not young people, but actually above 35 years old. In particularly the context of migrant workers, lack of media literacy very often to bring them into a vulnerable situation. We also would like to remind everyone, when we talk about violent extremism, we have to understand push and pull factors differently. Gender inequality and injustice, suggest stereotyping, subordination, marginalization, multi-burden, and violence. History of violence against women are actually often bring women into the vulnerable situation to connect with the group. The story of Ika Puspitasari, for example, one of the female terrorists in Indonesia, lived in the very poor family and had to stop her education and traveled abroad because of poverty, and then end up with the ISIS group. And that's amazing to see how Ika become very powerful, and then took a lot of action and even financing some of the terror act. Other issue on liberation is actually we found from our digital consultation among civil society, witnessing that many women feeling liberated when they joining with ISIS. It is because the ICE is able to use the narrative to convince a segmented group to be able, to exercise their power. One, the group that very obvious in Indonesia is migrant worker. The exercising from suppressive group, the multi-burden that they have to shoulder from the family, become the individual that able to decide whatever they want about the income that they raise from the travel. This is the picture. I don't want to explain.
Sorry, already
Yes?
time's up, Ruby. You have only 2 minutes left. Can you wind up
Oh,
your
okay.
presentation?
Yes, yes. Can I just
So
quickly?
2 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, this is just the shifting. That what happened is, if you see the blue color is become more and more serious. The engagement not only just supportive, the engagement is really substantial. And currently, we are still dealing with so many people, displaced people in Syria and Iraq at the border, and that actually making the security, women, peace and security agenda become very serious issue that we need to tackle. This is the intersection if you want to talk about women, peace and security and violent extremism. There are three important areas on the women rights, women participation, and gender-based violence. And then this is that we actually doing in Indonesia together with many groups. We continuing strengthening community resilience through the role of women, youth, and girls, because this is very important. When you have a strong community, you will see that the community will be able to deal with the external power, including the extremist group coming from outside the village. And then the other, actually, what we do on the strategy, rather working alone, we're building national coalition in handling reintegration and rehabilitation together with many civil society in order to be able to help the government in providing a better space for, increasing social acceptance among the people, but at the same time also preventing them to rejoining with the group. And recently, we also preparing for localization of preventing violent extremism, at the same time interconnecting with the implementation of women, peace and security. But I think these things we need to also highlight the important. I just want to highlight number 3. The way we're looking at this issue, it should be intersectionality and intersectorality.
Time's up. Can you wind up in?
Yes,
30 seconds,
and
yeah.
why? Because women are not single entities, and because with the whole society approach, we are able actually to use our resources as well as able to looking at more intersection analysis in dealing with ISIS sympathizer. And that is exactly the current women, peace and security agenda that we are facing and we are resolving now in Indonesia. Thank you. Anselmo, back to you.
Thank you, Ruby. I think it's also very interesting. But Indonesia is not the only your case. I think this can be also applied in other countries, right? Southeast Asia and South Asia, and particularly the voluntary extremism, which is prevailing in the region. So thank you for articulating your concern and then the activities in the context of the violent extremism and also linked to the WPS SDG. Now we are getting clearer idea. We have a global framework. Now we have concrete stories at the grassroots, the Philippines and Indonesia. So let's move to South Asia. So we have a Mridul from South Asia. He's also working international level, United Network for Young Peace Builders. And they are also very much focused on the 2250, the youth and peace and security. Mridul, you have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. I would just like to build upon what other colleagues have been sharing here. So specifically when we talk about 2250, just to introduce, I come from this United Network of Young Peace Builders, which is a global network of 120 youth-led peace-building organizations from 65 countries around the world. And why we are coming together and what is this entire agenda is that this narrative for young people. So what Bianca was sharing previously, like young people have either been considered as a victim of violence, and that's why they need to be supported, and this is mostly used for young women, and or they are considered as a perpetrator of the violence, so they need to be stopped. These are the major two narratives that we have for young people. But it's about young people like me, Bianca, and many more that you have seen in the recent photographs which Bianca was sharing in Philippines. So there are a lot of young people who are doing good for the community. They really want to do something beyond this binary narrative of victim or the perpetrator. But when they want to do something because the world is not seeing them beyond these two narratives, they are not included meaningfully. That's the entire challenge is when they are not included in the decision making. This becomes problematic because the policies are not designed, they are not supported. They whenever they want to reach out for a partnership, they are not trusted with those kind of partnership. And that's why young people have been calling for a global consensus around young people's role as a peace builder. So over the years, almost like 11,000 young people came from 110 countries, and there were few governments, NGOs, young organizations who were leading all of this effort. And then finally, we got this resolution, UNSCR 2250. It's the first ever common understanding among the member state, which says that okay, we recognize the important and key role that young people play in the peace building. But this is just a resolution, right? It has all of its recommendation: participation, protection, prevention, partnership, disengagement, and reintegration. It's very much linked with the women peace and security agenda. We really learned a lot from this agenda. But like our colleague from GNWP were previously sharing, that they are resolutions, they are resolution after resolutions, they are studies, but how the implementation is happening actually, that is the entire process. The missing piece report was that progress study which tried to see, okay, what is the current status of youth peace and security implementation. And it was an extensive study of like 4,230 young people who were consulted over a period of 2 years, so many focus group discussions in different countries, regional consultation, online consultation. And then there were some very stark key findings around how young people work, how youth-led peace building organizations work. So you might be seeing that Bianca's organization is trying to do a similar kind of work. So just consider that organization and try to relate these facts, how much similar the context can be. So there was this survey which was done with 399 youth-led peace building organization, and we found that 97% of their staff is unpaid volunteer. So this is the stark reality of youth-led organizations. Second is they're kind of gender balanced. Like 35%, 53% were led by male, 45% were led by female, and 2% by other genders. Funding has been a huge issue. Reason being, 49% operating under a USD 5,000 kind of annual budget. So now you see 97% unpaid staff, 5,000 USD available to most of the organization in an year. They will definitely not be able to do a lot for the community. And these has been challenges. But there are other few things which need to be debunked. One is this idea of that if the population is increasing, if the young people's population is increasing, then there will be more violence in that region. No, so that has been like there is no correlation between youth bulge and the violence. But usually policies are designed in a manner that if there will be more people, they will be having more conflict, they will be unrest because of unemployment or not getting enough opportunities, and that's why there will be more violence. But that's untrue. Second is the how you see the young people, young migrant, refugees, and internally displaced people. So they are not threat to the host community. Rather, they are actually contributing a lot to the community. And one more thing is that young people are not drawn to violence simply because of lack of employment or education. This has been like mostly you will see the national action plan which are being developed by the countries. They will see, okay, if young people are falling into the violence, then simply it is because they are not getting employed or they are not educated. So let's provide them. But it is beyond that. There is a social, political agency that they want to exercise. They want to be engaged in meaningfully in the decision making. And the last part is that some of the countering and preventing methods are not sufficient. So there have been recommendation. I invite you to read this entire thing to understand more. I specifically want to talk about this third resolution on youth peace and security, which is around implementation. Like it has been 5 years in 2015. So now, how is the implementation happening at the regional level, at the sub-regional level, or at the local level? So for that, I have a very small this mapping that I want to share with you. So here you will see we have tried to see what is the level of youth participation in national YPS implementation. Very simply, you can check it on the Google YPSmonitor.com. So here, these are the countries where we have some progress available, and wherever you don't see blue, we don't have a lot of progress available. We would definitely like to help, get help in getting some information if you have available around youth peace and security in your country. So here, zero was launched. Meeting was organized around this resolution. You will see very few countries. Then you will be trying to see, okay, how many countries are there where you have, let's say, a coalition which is around peace and security. Learning a lot, like how these coalitions are very much important if we really want to engage meaningfully in national processes, if we want to have a transparent implementation, or if we really want to have an accountability of these efforts. So these are the countries where we have tried to see, and you will see in these blues. You can just go on the on it, and you can see like what is the level in each countries, what is the information around it. Then how many countries have national coalition roadmaps available? So currently we have only Finland and Philippines. These are the two countries in the world who are trying to develop a national NAP, and that's why they have created a roadmap to it. But no other country has that. It has been 5 years. So this is the way, like how we are lacking in the things. And then there is no national action plan currently in any country. National action plan is not the most important, but it is also very important because it brings the resources and commitment there. So these were just like have a look and maybe use this tool for doing the national advocacy that is required. When UN resolution passes and it has been 5 years and no specific action done, I think these kind of and this is a youth-led independent effort of this mapping. We are reaching out to the young people, trying to see what is the information available in that country and trying to map it out. So this has been some of the effort, and there will be a progress research which will be done around all of these, which will be available on this website itself. Yeah, with this, I will leave you with Mr. Lee. Thank you so much. If you have any question, I'm happy to take it.
Thank you very much, Muridu Upada. It's another excellent presentation which helps us to understand more in-depth 2250. It's very clear now, both 1325, but very interestingly, 1325 resolution was 2000 when MDG started, right? But 2250 was 2015 where the SDG was adopted, right? So the 20 years and then 5 years. But yet both face huge challenge of the implementation gap, right? And especially I was very surprised, to see that there's no NAP, National Action Plan on youth, peace and security. No country at all, But, YPS, at least several countries in Asia. I think this can be our common challenge at the same time, agenda for PyeongChang Peace Forum. Where the PyeongChang Peace Forum, that time, 3 years ago, it was an Olympic. The athletes were young people, but now, not athletes, but the activists, peace builders, PyeongChang can be a platform for youth peacemakers, the peace builders together around WPS and the YPS, the coming 10 years or 20 years. And so thank you for giving that idea to set the agenda for PyeongChang. So now let's come back to Northeast Asia, hotspot here, Northeast Asia. As you know, the PyeongChang is very much, the core mandate of PyeongChang very much linked to denuclearization process, not only in North Korea, but Korean Peninsula, and also beyond the Korean Peninsula, Northeast Asia and global, So now we have very two interesting agenda. The first, let's go to the Mongolia. Mongolia is like a Philippines, It's a very good example of denuclearization peace building many. So let me introduce Ambassador Ansai Khan, who is the chairperson of Blue Banner. Please introduce Blue Banner and also the agenda of Northeast Asia nuclear weapon free zone. Please, Ambassador, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizing such a very rich discussion, because I have learned quite a lot from the previous speakers about the challenges, the futures, and so on and so forth. Blue Banner NGO was established in 2005, 15 years ago, to promote Mongolia's nuclear weapon-free zone status, as well as to contribute its ideas and to work with other regional peace organizations to promoting peace and understanding in this region. Blue Banner works mainly with the young people nationally, and internationally it partners with such organizations as International Peace Bureau, GPAC, ICANN, IPPNW, and so on and so forth. And it is also part of a Ulaanbaatar process, which was launched in 2015 by GPAC and its network NGO organizations. The main aim of Ulaanbaatar process is to develop track 2 dialogue process and establish, to the extent possible, a mechanism for peace and security, discussion of peace and security in Northeast Asia. To that end, it provides a venue and even political space for regional NGOs to meet and exchange views and come up with joint decisions and so on and so forth. And it includes representatives of both Koreas, which is very, very important. So this is briefly what Blue Banner is working on. I'm honored that Blue Banner continues to be an active participant of PPF. I was asked to talk about the issue of establishing a Northeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone, whether it is possible, and because this is an issue that is future-looking. It's oriented to the future. I will focus on 3 issues. First, what is a nuclear weapon-free zone, which is very important. Then, does Northeast Asia need such a zone? And whether it is doable. So these are the 3 issues that I would like to focus on. Northeast nuclear weapon-free zone is a practical regional measure to strengthen the non-proliferation regime, promote regional trust and dialogue, and thus strengthen international peace and security. It is established by non-nuclear weapon states and is based on trust, agreement, and effective verification. These are the 3 traits of nuclear weapon-free zones. The 5 nuclear weapon zones, in return, provide security assurances that none of them would use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against such zones. Today, there are, as you might know, there are 5 nuclear weapon-free zones in the world, which encompass about 40% of the world's population, 56% of the Earth's surface, and 60% of the UN membership. So it is a very big movement in that sense. The second issue, does Northeast Asia need it? As Anselmo, you have already pointed out, there is no nuclear weapon-free zone in Northeast Asia, though politically it needs badly. since there are 3 nuclear weapon states, 1 de facto nuclear state, and a number of nuclear capable states in the region where there is still lack of trust, as well as unresolved many historical and territorial issues. Proposals to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula during the Cold War were made by China and North Korea. And that was intended mainly to force withdrawal of US nuclear forces in South Korea. In early 1990s, when the US withdrew its nuclear weapons from South Korea, and when the 2 Koreas came together and agreed in a declaration to establish a nuclear weapon-free Korean Peninsula, it provided, I think, a good input, a push to practical importance. However, to this day, the issue has not been considered officially. For geopolitical reasons, the issue has almost been as a political taboo. However, the situation has began to change with North Korea's nuclear weapons program and its nuclear and missile tests. There are talks now underway to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, though there is no agreement on what it means. However, bearing in mind the wider regional interest, it is being proposed to establish a Northeast Asian regional zone that would include not only the 2 Koreas, but also Japan, and to which US, China, and Russia, the nuclear weapon states, would provide credible security assurances. In such case, everyone would be a winner. Think tanks and scholars in the region and in the US are now discussing the issue of the format and content of a possible zone. The third question is it doable? At this stage, governments of the region, except for Mongolia, are keeping quiet, silent. In 2013, Mongolia expressed readiness to undertake informal meetings on the issue. People might ask, why Mongolia all of a sudden? There are a number of reasons. First, it witnessed every 4th nuclear weapon tests in its vicinity. So it knows what nuclear tests means. Second, it maintains good relations with all the countries of the region, including the 2 Koreas, which is very important. Third, and which is very important, is also that during the Cold War, as Soviet ally, it hosted Soviet bases, and at the height of Sino-Soviet border conflict, there was a high risk that in their military conflict, perhaps even with the use of nuclear weapons, Mongolia might suffer the most. That was the lesson that we have learned, and that's why when Russia withdrew its military bases from Mongolia in 1992, Mongolia declared its territory a nuclear weapon-free zone and promised to its people to work actively to realize this goal. After 2 decades of persistent mid-level talks with the 5 nuclear weapon states, they have signed a joint declaration promising to Mongolia and to each other, which is very important, to respect and honor the status. By doing so, Mongolia has demonstrated that with hard work, persistence, and compromise, it is possible to reach political agreements even on such delicate issues, even between big states and small states. So, if a small non-nuclear weapon state can do that, then medium and larger states, including perhaps allies of nuclear weapon states, like Japan and South Korea, can be more forthcoming than just declaring support for nuclear non-proliferation policy. Mongolia's policy has also shown that expert and academic level studies can be useful and productive if they are followed up by process of starting to practically address the issues from seemingly minor issues to larger ones, since in many cases, the processes can be productive and promote greater confidence, which is very important. They can be as important as the main goals themselves. Even at times, process can be more effective if it comes not from any government, but from non-partisan NGOs and think tanks. Bearing that in mind, recently Blue Banner and some other regional NGOs have launched a process of informal exchanges of views and ideas on how to practically pursue the issue, to which others might contribute or even join, and in which the missing piece of the larger puzzle, North Korea, might develop interest mindful of its own long-term self-interest. Also, halting a senseless arms race in the region would allow diverting more resources to address such common threats as the climate change and the pandemic, and to help implementing the SDGs by 2030, which is in itself a tall order. In short, establishing a Northeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone is doable, but would need first NGOs and scholars to start a political process to which governments might join at an appropriate time for them. Bearing the above in mind, Blue Banner would suggest to reflect in the revised 2021 PCAP 2030 a provision encouraging promotion of a multilateral process of establishing a Northeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador N. Kai-kan. Can you explain, there's a beautiful calligraphy behind you. It's a traditional Mongolian word, right? So what does it mean? Can you explain what does it mean?
This, I was given this by the academic circles, appointing me as an honorable member of the academy.
Okay.
So it says to the Dr. Eng Saikan for his contribution, and we're looking forward to working together with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
now I understand, I thought initially it was the meaning of the blue banner, It's a traditional the Mongolian calligraphy.
Well, if you enter my office, yes, you will see big writing in Mongolian and in English, Blue Banner.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think this Northeast Asia nuclear-free zone is not very popular yet. I think this is one of the most important future agenda that we need to carry out. I think he articulated very well and also relevance in today's practice in Northeast Asia. Let's move to the last but not the least. In fact, this is the most important issue of this year, I have to say, because finally we made a small but very significant victory. It's a very rare case. So I'm very happy to introduce Mary, who played a key role, especially the Peace Board, as a Japan, but it's a global NGO. So I'm very happy to introduce Mary to introduce this story of our struggle for TPNW. Mary, please.
Thank you very much, Anselmo, and thank you everyone else for the previous presentations. It was shared. I really had a lot to learn and think about as our common agenda for civil society here in Northeast Asia. So as introduced, my name is Mary Joyce. I'm joining today from Tokyo, where I work for a Japanese NGO called Peace Boat. And Peace Boat is a partner and one of the international steering group organizations of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN. And ICAN played a large role in achieving the nuclear ban treaty, which Anselmo just referred to. So today I'll take hopefully a very brief amount of time just to share a little bit of information about this treaty, but particularly about the role of civil society in achieving it and highlighting that there is still a lot that we can do to contribute to the process of real elimination of nuclear weapons as well. So as Anselmo mentioned, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the Nuclear Ban Treaty is maybe the easier way to call it, It was adopted several years ago at the United Nations, and finally, just this year, just a couple of weeks ago, actually on January 22, after having achieved the number of countries ratifying it necessary, it has now entered into force, which means that nuclear weapons are now officially illegal under international law. This is, of course, something that the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also of nuclear tests and of the nuclear chain all around the world have really been calling for many different decades. So it's a very significant milestone. And we can see some of the photographs here are of celebrations that were held on that day. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the two larger photos, and then also actions of ICANN partners in New York. This is actually the UN headquarters building that some of you will recognize as well. So this treaty was achieved through the efforts, as mentioned, of many different civil society groups around the world, together with humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross, movements of doctors, environmental groups. And I would also highlight that there was a huge role played by youth-led organizations, and also by feminist groups in this as well. So ICANN is, it's not one particular organization, it's a network of around 600 partner organizations in more than 100 countries, including also, as Ambassador Ensaihan mentioned, Blue Banner in Mongolia, and also Bianca's organization in the Philippines is one of the key groups working there as well, the Center for Peace Education as well. And so it was founded just 10 years ago, actually. So it's a very new network, and it has been very much focusing on these efforts to achieve a UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons. My organization, Peaceboat, is one of the international steering group members of ICANN, as I mentioned. Usually we carry out our programs on board a passenger ship, which you can see in this photograph. And this is a group of Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors who we invite regularly to join on our voyages to share their firsthand testimony and to share really the urgency of the need to ban nuclear weapons. As a result of this work in 2017, some of you may be aware that ICANN was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its work to draw attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and the groundbreaking efforts to achieve the treaty. So here, this is a photograph of Hiroshima survivor Setsuko Thurlow receiving the award on behalf of all of the ICANN member organizations, together with the Secretary General Beatrice Finn. So just to say very briefly, well, why it is that this is needed. I think Ambassador Ensaihan has shared very well the threat that we still have in our region. But just to show here, there are still more than 13,000 nuclear weapons existing in the world today. And this is, of course, something which has, each of them have a huge amount more power than those that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Not over this, but also they would have the significant impact, on not only on the city where a bomb might be used, whether it's deliberate or accidental, but also on the global climate, on the environment, creating a food crisis and so on as well. This is a graph showing the trend in how many nuclear weapons have existed since their development in 1945. So you can see that since the Cold War, when they were at their peak at about 60,000 weapons, there has been a decrease. However, there is still this huge threat that is being posed, every day to our lives and to our planet. This is, of course, not only the threats by their actual use, but as Ensaihan mentioned as well, nuclear testing and the huge impacts that that has, and also even uranium mining. The different parts of the nuclear cycle indeed have huge impacts on people's health, on culture, on livelihoods, and the environment. And I would also highlight that it's really indigenous communities that are very often at the brunt of this kind of testing and nuclear development as well. So what was really key in this movement to achieve the nuclear ban treaty was bringing the voices of those who are impacted and bringing these humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons to the fore. This photograph is from one of Peaceboat's visits to Tahiti, the nuclear test victims from the French nuclear testing in the Pacific, meeting together with Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors as well. Also, being that I'm originally from Australia, also to highlight the indigenous communities that have been impacted by nuclear tests carried out in Australia, and also struggling against uranium mining and disposal of nuclear waste. So this connection also with the nuclear chain and nuclear power as well shows how, countries like Japan, where I am, or, Korea, where the forum is being hosted, who are still relying on nuclear power, also has this connection overall to the impacts that are being felt by communities. So this leads us to, as I mentioned, just over 3 years ago, when the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was finally adopted at the United Nations. This was thanks to the voices of such survivors and civil society really standing up and bringing these voices and the humanitarian impact to the fore. The treaty was adopted with the support of 122 countries. Unfortunately, not from Northeast Asia, but many countries throughout the Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, where, as mentioned, there are nuclear-free zones already, played a very significant role in this as well. So we can see here some of the survivors and civil society who at the United Nations were very active in this as well, including Sue Coleman, who is an Indigenous leader from Australia who has been struggling against this issue, for example. The campaigners of ICANN also put these large origami paper cranes on the desks of countries which were not present at the negotiations. It's a little bit hard to see, but written on the paper crane, it says, "I wish you were here." So this is just highlighting the emptiness of these voices as well, and trying to encourage participation in the treaty. So what does the treaty actually talk about? Yes, it's the nuclear ban treaty, but I want to highlight that it not only bans having nuclear weapons, but also testing them, threatening to use them, or assisting and encouraging them as well. So this also includes, for example, investments in industries that contribute to nuclear testing. It also puts forward a concrete pathway towards the total elimination of nuclear weapons. And I would say it's also very unique because it's very much a survivor-centered approach with the voices of the hibakusha at the fore. And it also includes clauses for victim assistance and environmental remediation. It also highlights the different gendered impacts of nuclear weapons as well. So I think these are really important points. And the fact that they were included in such a disarmament treaty is really something to celebrate. At the same time, this leads us to question, well, what is it that these countries that are still relying on nuclear weapons think that they will protect them from? I think in the past year, as every country is going through the COVID-19 pandemic, many people are starting to question what really is security? What are our government budgets, our spending on? How can that actually help to protect people's livelihoods, people's everyday situation and so on? Last year we saw the natural disasters like typhoons and the fire here in Australia. Also, of course, the COVID pandemic and its ongoing situation as well makes us really think, what should the priorities be for government spending and for scientific development? And how can we really keep people safe and protect their livelihoods and planet? This has been one of the key conversations at the center of ICANN's campaign and the nuclear ban treaty. And I think it very much connects to the SDGs agenda that we've been discussing today as well. So I'll just end with a couple of concrete examples of ways that people can get involved. Often when we think about nuclear weapons, people think that it's an issue just for our governments or just for countries to be deciding. But there's many different ways that civil society, whether you're working in an organization or just on your own, can really make a difference and make an impact, especially now that the treaty has come into force. It's now international law, things that you can do, such as write to your government, to get on social media. ICANN has a whole lot of, Instagram events or different tools that you can share with your friends, this kind of thing as well. There's also, we mentioned about the investment and support for nuclear weapons development now being banned. There's also a campaign that we're running called Don't Bank on the Bomb. This is led by an organization called PAX in the Netherlands, but it's looking also so that people can look up where their bank accounts are investing in, or where your university maybe is investing in, where pension fund money is going, and this kind of thing as well. And the other thing, like Bianca mentioned as well, it's much easier now for people to join events online in many places, even as we're not able to gather together in person. So I'll end with one very concrete example of the way that you can get involved. My organization, PISO, last year, marking the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also, of course, to celebrate the entry into force of the nuclear ban treaty, we have launched a program called Every Second Counts for the Survivors, the Peace Boat Hibakusha project online. As I mentioned, usually we would have been inviting the survivors to travel on board our passenger ship to visit different countries, but that's not possible at the moment. So instead, we are holding online testimony sessions with different schools or community groups, youth groups all over the world as well. And we're hoping by the end of this year to hold these kind of events in 100 different countries, and a video compilation of messages from people around the world will be shared at the first meeting of the states parties to the Nuclear Ban Treaty, which is planned to be held in Austria at the end of this year as well. So we're looking for organizations to endorse this campaign, for people to join the conversation on social media, to host a Zoom event, at your school or in your community, and volunteers to be involved in all of these as well. So please take a look at our website for more different information. And I wanted to end with this, hopefully a very concrete call to show that really each and every individual citizen can really make a difference on these kinds of issues as well. Look forward to connecting with you all further. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. I think you clearly explained to us why it's important, particularly in this region, Northeast Asia, and also how we can work together, to achieve this vision of the nuclear weapon-free zone globally and also in Northeast Asia. So in a way, we have a double task, this TPNW at the same Northeast Asia, which is really challenging. So I hope PyeongChang can be also one of the useful platforms to realize our common vision. Unfortunately, time's up, and we don't have enough time to collect a question and interact discussion, because I want to give enough time for you to explain, because you have many issues to explain, but unfortunately we need to sacrifice this Q&A. But let me share with you later on a summary of our discussion, and also I want to collect all your suggestions and attach to the summary, and then we put in the website. And then, as you know, the last year we have a PyeongChang Message for Peace 2021. And this year, we are not going to adopt another message because we cannot meet physically. So we'll make a summary, summary of all the suggestions, key points, and then we'll put in the PyeongChang Agenda for Peace. And also, I want to discuss with you separately later on how you can prepare for agenda for PyeongChang Peace Forum 2022, post-corona, Especially, I want to make a more long-term agenda, not ad hoc, So I'm trying to identify, for instance, the YPS, the youth peace security. This is a huge challenge. Of course, Northeast Asia nuclear-free zone, and how to make, all those, the countries surrounding Korean Peninsula Ocean. No country has ratified, as Mary pointed out. Japan is a victim of, the first victim country of nuclear, but not yet ratified. And also South Korea, North Korea, China, Russia. So I think this is our long-term agenda for campaign. And also, of course, a positive peace at 16. So, and 1325. I'll put them into the part of agenda, regular agenda of PyeongChang Agenda for Peace. So possibly and hopefully you can organize a more in-depth session next year, so we can go deeper, So remember, so PyeongChang can be a useful platform for our common action plan, So with this promise, and also I want to thank once again. I know you are very difficult time zone, especially the Mavic from New York. So thank you for your active participation and contribution. So let's keep in touch, and then all the best. Okay, thank you. Bye.